Welcome back to another session. I hope you were well. This is a new week, so we start a new series, a new theme, and what I hope will be a productive and a successful series of sessions, primarily targeted towards men, but building on the conversations that I have had in the prior sessions. For over 2 weeks, I should say perhaps 4 weeks, I have covered 2 or 3 different topic sessions. They have been building blocks upon each other. The overarching theme was about success. It was directed at men. Women, obviously, are more than welcome to listen, to learn, and when they do, they will better understand men, and as a matter of fact, the principles are no respecter of gender or persons. It can be applied without reference to sex. In some instances, where specifically tailored to men, if you apply the process of inversion, a woman can apply the same principles and achieve the same results. I themed the first one, the challenge to succeed. And in there I invited men to look to themselves and to look to their vision, goals and dreams and the obstacles that might be stopping them from achieving such said goals, said dreams and visions. I moved on to another session where I covered the burden of performance and how men success should be a duty, an obligation, a responsibility, a calling, almost a magnificent obsession. And I try to cover things that perhaps stop men, young men particularly, from achieving their true success, however they define that. The idea was simply applying what I call the negative art to success. You eliminate obstacles in the way, and therefore you should achieve the destination much quicker by avoiding significant obstacles. We get to our destination, whatever it might be. Now, a few weeks ago, or a few days ago rather, weeks, days, I started a conversation with someone, and that conversation prompted what I thought was perhaps a useful series of sessions to address. I have covered this previously in sessions that I have done, but I thought perhaps a reminder was necessary, a refresher session. Let me start by saying as follows. These few series of sessions that will follow, or the sessions that I will cover, especially this week, will be very, very hard for some to take. It's not for everyone. I've made a mistake over my life, and I've always thought that one of the best things that one can do is to invest one life in another life, and that people can learn from your successes, or they can learn from your failures. And if you teach people how not to fail, and if you invest the mistakes you have made into other people, thereby preventing them from committing mistakes that you have made or mistakes that you've observed other people make, then maybe your suffering perhaps had a purpose. I'm going to talk about some very uncomfortable conversations and refer to some very glaring statistics and statements and data. Let me start by saying I'm advocating for men. Now, if you are a woman and you have a son, let that be at the center of your mind, which is I'm advocating for your son. If you have a brother and you love him, I'm advocating for your brother. But if you have neither a son nor a brother, pretend you do, and therefore see the conversations that I have from the male's perspective, specifically success. What I intend to do is start today's session as an introduction. I think it would be right and it would be remiss of me not to say the younger men have been failed by older men, my generation, and the generations before mine, specifically the baby boom generation. Generation X men or parents who fall within the Generation X in the West and the baby boom generation have done a huge disservice towards younger men these days. I look towards the silent generation and the great generation as perhaps, in my opinion, one of the most important generations that we could relate to, connect with. A lot of the things we celebrate, especially in the West, has come from the sacrifices made by the men and the women of those two generations. I've been observing from my anecdotal limited experience, but also from the data, the research, the study. I've been observing that young men are lost. They lack a sense of purpose. They lack a sense of direction. They lack a sense of meaning. They don't understand the importance of suffering because in many ways they've been raised to live in their feelings and emotions, and happiness is the pursuit. So let me start by saying, as I begin this session, that I am to blame. My generation are to blame. The generation before mine are to blame. Older men, I hold us responsible for failing to transmit the good values, the character, the principles, the philosophy, and examples to younger men, and by failing to pour our life into theirs, they are making mistakes that were avoidable and are avoidable. That's the first thing to say. The second, when I speak, generally speaking, especially with regards to men, I put men into three groups. 0 to 18 or 0 to 17, you're not an adult. 18 to 35, my core focus. 35, 36 and over. For those who are 35 and above, I consider you to be a man. You should have, all things remaining equal, had the same level of experience that men within the same age group should have had, and therefore you are an independent adult. You're more than welcome to listen to what I have to share. The group between 18 and 35 is my focus, because I think I can make significant changes, impact in that group. Some time back, I had a conversation with a young man, 20, going on 21. It was strange. And he said to me in the conversation, I asked what was new in his life and how he was. And he said he had started to see someone. He then went on to say that he had broken up with an ex-girlfriend. And as part of the breakup, which is very severe on him, he started coming to the gym. I met him in the gym. And he found that the discipline of coming to the gym helped him grow. But he had started seeing another girl. And I said, great, congratulations. You seem happy. He said yes, that he's never felt a connection with her as he did previously. Now, from what he did explain, the prior girlfriend, in his words, did him wrong. No judgment. There's three sides to every story, his, hers, and the truth tends to lie somewhere in between. He then goes on to say, without prompting, that she's 18 years. I said, interesting. I have an issue with young men going into relationships. And at the core of what I'm going to be talking about today is how relationships are dream killers. Relationships can kill your dream if they come too early. And if you're not provided with the right guidance. Relationship will kill your vision and kill your dreams. But he says that she's 18 and she has 2 kids. Now my worry senses immediately are activated. I should say this young man that I'm referring to, I had met him in the gym prior to that, and I had interacted with him And I found him to be, generally speaking, of good stock. In other words, he was quite mature for his age, very hardworking, very dedicated. One of the few that I would say that I would pay attention to. Some of them come in that package. You could look at them and say, do you know what? He looks like he has a good head on his shoulders. So I asked him a question. I said, 2 children from 2 different men. Sorry, she has 2 children. And I asked from how many fathers? And he says 2 fathers. And I think to myself, this is not good. I said, when did she have her first child? He said 16. Second child, 18. Okay. She lives alone. And I look at him straight in the eyes and I say, run. And he's stunned. I said, I'm going to speak to you like I would a loved one, my younger brother. But I would say to you, run. Run away from this relationship. Walk away. Don't look back. Don't explain. Move on very quickly. Now we go on to talk about it later, very briefly. What I intend to do, because I have observed that a lot of young men are falling into the same trap of sacrificing their futures, their purpose, their goals, their dreams for relationships. But even worse than that, sacrificing all of what I have mentioned for the wrong relationships. Now, let me start by saying as follows. We all know someone who maybe falls within the same category of what we call single mothers. I did a session some time back where I categorized single mothers into groups, trying to make a distinction that they're not all the same. Let me go through some of them very quickly. At the time, I called it type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. Now, I come from the teachings and the trainings that we are supposed to look out for the widows and the orphans. So I make exceptions. And I look very favorably to widows and orphans because that's the mandate. It is a Judeo-Christian mandate to care for those who cannot care for themselves by virtue of whatever you can muster. It's something you should do. It's part of your responsibility. Women who have children within the context of a marriage, but go on to separate, we call them divorced women who have children, is one type. Women who had children or have had a child within the context of a marriage, but the husband died, we call them widows. That's the first 2 groups. The third is women who have a child out of wedlock. They're unmarried, but they have a child. Single mothers, but we tend to call them baby mamas. Women, number 4, who have children, unmarried, out of wedlock, but who have multiple children from the same father. We put in another category, say 4. And number 5, women unmarried who have children out of wedlock from multiple fathers. Number 5. Now, all of those groups of women are not the same. Generally speaking, the outcome is the same because you're still dealing with someone who is a single mother. Let me start by saying as follows. Think about this as conversations that I will have, not as an emotional interaction, but as a logical conversation. I'm thinking in outcomes. As a matter of fact, I care much more about who you could become as a man than I care about your affection and your liking of who I am and what I say. I do not care much for the delivery of the message. I care about giving you the message. Now, I understand that the delivery has to be provided and packaged in a way that you can accept. But imagine yourself in the middle of a storm and the boat is about to capsize. The captain does not come down to the cabin and try to wake you up gently. He shakes you vigorously and says, "We're going down. Brace, brace." That is what I'm doing with you. Ignore the delivery of the message. Focus on the message. Now, if you do not like the message, shut your eyes and listen to the resident speak. We all know someone who falls within one of those 5 types of women, primarily because in the UK, for women who are 40 years and below, 1 in 3 who have children are raised without a father and are raised effectively to what you might call an only parent family, a mother raising the children. But what is rather startling and concerning is for women who are 35 and below, that number jumps to 1 in 2. For women who are 30 and below, that number jumps even further to almost 70% of children being born to women who are 30 years and below are being raised from age 2 and above, are being raised without father involvement. 70s. Now, what this simply means is that if you live in the West, we're all connected in some way, and therefore it doesn't have to be 6 degrees of separation. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 degrees of separation. You know someone connected to you who falls within the statistics. So the conversation I am going to be having this week and the sessions that follow will be emotionally charged for you. I'm asking you to think about the men I'm speaking to, a son, a brother, or a friend. And I'm asking you to put your emotions aside and think about those faces of men and what you would wish for them as the best outcome. It will be hard, I understand, but look towards the outcomes. Let me also state that over the years I've been teaching, I have been sharing ideas for more than a decade now. When I started, my idea was to reach as many people as I could. In this particular message, I'm going to narrow my focus. I mentioned the age group or the 3 categories, but I want to narrow it down to the top 5 to 10% of all men in all of those categories. The reason is a simple one. A few months ago, I did a series of sessions where I talked about the fact that most men in the West, unfortunately by virtue of some of the progressive ideas and ideologies, and as a result of we being raised without father involvement, we've been raised to be very feminine men, beta males. And 80%, in my opinion, of men in the West, as a minimum, fall within that beta category. There is an installation in you, a software. We live in a gynocentric society. Most men in the West have been raised to be weak men, to be femme in their mindset. They have no masculinity at their core. They don't understand manhood. They went from male to boyhood. Some of them are even gentlemen, so they skipped the manhood. There are 4 stages. Male, you're born male. However, you don't stay as a male. Through modeling, you become a boy. By observing other people, you become a boy. You go from boyhood to manhood by work, teaching, training, study, practice, wisdom, understanding. You move from being a man to being a gentleman by being crafted. It's a craft. Most men in the West go from male to boyhood. Some stay in boyhood, which is why we have a lot of Peter Pan type men in the West. But some transition because they're raised in the right way to be gentlemen, but from a gynocentric perspective. So they move from male to boyhood to gentleman, but they skip manhood. A lot of the conversations I will have and a lot of the pushback that I will get in with regards to my sessions will come from men. Why? Because 80% or more of men in the West, in my opinion, have a beta installation. Only about 20% are still traditional, have the right masculine frame, understand manhood, and were raised differently. Of the 20%, I want to focus on about half of those. So I'm looking for 5 to 10% of all men. So the message may not be for you. Now, if I alienate most men as part of the conversation, then I think I've done my job, because my focus is on the 5 to 10% who really want to be successful. Now, let me also say something as a refresher. Relationships are dream killers, especially if the relationships come at the wrong time, or if the relationships are not the right type. Bad relationships will not only kill your dreams, but they will also sabotage your purpose, your potential, your future, and they even leave you almost destitute. One of such relationships is any form of intimate relationship with a single mother. I intend to explain why. I would advise men between 18 and 35 to stay clear of single mothers. Let me preface what will flow, because I think it's important to understand. In intersexual dynamics, we play a very subtle dance. In the old French reference, there used to be a saying, what do you bring to the table? Playing cards? At the moment where you run out of your cards, you turn the table upside down and everyone is equal. But with regards to dating, when we ask the question, what do you bring to the table? We're simply saying, what are you bringing to the conversation, to the interaction, to allow for some form of meaningful exchange? Fair, equal, or something close? In intersexual dynamics, there's a dance we dance. I start as follows, because I think this is key. There's a marketplace. The marketplace is split into two parts. There's the marketplace for dating, and there's the marketplace for relationships. Men and women sometimes are aware of the notion of the marketplace. Some do it consciously, and some don't. For men, dating is a short-term experience. Why? Because we are driven by our urge to ejaculate. Dating and sex are synonymous with regards to men or boys. The reason a man goes on a date is not to get to know you, and I'm speaking about men who are men, not beta males. Beta males and femme males over the past 70 years, especially in the West, have been raised to live in their feelings, which is why you can see most men talk about airy-fairy stuff. Traditional men or normal men tend to go on dates because they want to have sex. That's the motivation. Women, on the other hand, go on dates for other motives. It could be intimacy, it could be affection, it could just be interaction, it could just be conversation and communication, it could just be to have fun and have a good time. For men, it's purely sex. There's one major motivating factor. In the relationship marketplace, the motivations change. Both men and women are looking for something long-term and meaningful. So you have various derivatives. My focus is always marriage. There are derivatives such as civil partnerships, cohabitation, but I do not consider these to be as important. Marriage should be the gold standard, and is, and continues and will remain as the gold standard, irrespective of what happens in the West. In the dating marketplace, the levels of power are not consistent within the relationship marketplace. I'm explaining all of this as a preface to what will be a series of sessions, because if you get the basis of what I'm trying to share and the basic understanding, it would make sense as to why I am taking certain positions. Women play a role as gatekeepers in the dating marketplace. Men play the role as gatekeepers in the relationship marketplace for the following reasons. A woman pays a heavier penalty in the event that interactions in the dating marketplace go awry. A woman, therefore, is a gatekeeper to her body, her emotions, and her womb. When a woman has sex, of the two sexes, a woman pays a heavier penalty for reproduction. So women have to be more selective about choosing the right mate because she pays a heavier penalty if she gets pregnant. Men, on the other hand, do not pay the same level of penalty. A woman is taken out of the game for 9 months in a whole year. If she gets pregnant, men can go on every single day and procreate with different women. So we do not pay a heavier penalty. Therefore, in the dating marketplace, the levels of power is controlled by the woman. That levels of power is maintained and controlled by the woman until a certain age. Women are gatekeepers to their bodies, their emotions, and their womb. They decide when intimacy and affection begins. They determine when sex occurs. And when the sex occurs, they determine whether they allow a child to be born. In the relationship marketplace, Men control the levels of power. Why? Because in the modern West, marriage, cohabitation, civil partnership is a liability to most men. There is no benefit to men to be in a relationship or to be married, because we can get all of the supposedly obvious benefits that marriage brings without being married. There is no benefit to men to be married. In any case, we carry a heavier liability if we get married. In 9 out of 10 times, the family court system favors the woman against the man. If there is a divorce, for which 1 in 2 divorces and relationships will end in divorce, in 7 out of 10 times the woman files for divorce. In the remaining 3 of 10, half of that she demands the man files on her behalf. So in 8.5 or 85% of the time, 8.5 out of 10 times, the woman is the one walking away. Therefore, not only does he lose the children, he loses the family home, he loses 50% of his net worth, and then he has to pay alimony, child support, in some cases until the children turn 18. So it's a bad deal for men. Therefore, we are gatekeepers, and we have to be careful about who we go on 1 knees, 2 knees, or no knees to ask to join us in a union. Civil partnership and cohabitation are derivatives of marriage. I don't care whether you say we're not married. The moment you live together, the family court system has treated and continues to treat civil partnership arrangements and cohabitation arrangements just as equally as they do marriage. So men are gatekeepers in relationships. Now, the reason I have gone through the process of explaining this is, if you're dating casually, you might say the strategy that a man should abide by is very different to if you are looking for a relationship. With regards to single mothers, and this is a controversial take, which I will explain further down the line. Single mothers, if you are a man and you're looking for sex, short-term experience and fun, ideally you should avoid any form of interaction with a single mother for various reasons. I will go through those in the sessions to follow. Just stay tuned. But the key thing is as follows. With the exception of the first 2 types of single mothers that I mentioned, widows and divorcees, with the exception of the first 2, a single mother simply represents someone who's made bad decisions. I will go into it in more detail, and therefore what you're doing is you're coming into union with a bad deal. Now remember, I'm not talking about the person. I'm not judging the individual. I'm judging the outcomes. Single mothers are perfectly lovely people. They do incredible work. The work they do raising children on their own is immense. I admire it. But I'm looking at outcomes. If I took 2 parts of hydrogen and I mixed it with 1 part of oxygen, I get a compound called H2O. Colloquially, we call it water. I can drink it. It's odorless, it's colorless, and it will nourish me. If I change the compositions of the mix and I decide, well, I like to mix 2 parts for equality reasons, 2 parts of hydrogen with 2 parts of oxygen, I create a different compound, H2O2. We call it hydrogen peroxide. It's odorless and it's colorless, but if I drink it, it could kill me. The way you mix the composition determines the outcome. All I'm simply saying is, if you were to take someone who is single, unmarried, and someone who is single, unmarried, and you mix it together, you will get an outcome. If you take someone who has never been married, but has given the man the highest honor to reproduce for him, her emotions, her body, her womb, and you mix it with a man who's never been married, the outcome will not be dissimilar to the first. Now keep that in mind. The kids involved in this conversation are not to blame. I do not hold any of the kids responsible. I hold 2 people responsible, the man and the woman. And so in the conversations that follow, I will be talking about how this is a bad deal for young men. Bad relationships will sabotage your success, but particularly relationships that you go into, intimate relationships that you get into with people who have either reproduced for another man, are horrible, horrendous deals. I'm going to end today's session by sharing with you a few things. So keep in mind, I will expand on these things in the sessions that follow. But think about this. Remember what I said at the start. Imagine, in case you do not have the experience, imagine you are a mother, you have a son. The question is, what would you want as the best outcome for your son? If I brought to you two cars, and one car, I said the car has had 3 accidents, serious, significant, fatal accidents, but it's been restored, but it has a very high mileage. And I bring a similar car to the first one, same model, same make, same year, but it's not had any accidents, and it has a lower mileage. And I ask you, which of the two would you buy? Assuming the price was the same. It would be absurd of you to choose the first car for various reasons. We would say, depending on the category or the classification of the damage, we might say this first car is a write-off, and therefore it's a bad deal if you were to purchase that. Think from the perspective of value, price, and worth. I'm not suggesting that single mothers have no worth as people. We're all intrinsically equal. We're equal under the law. We have equality of rights. Well, I hope we do. I think we do. So I want a society with equality of opportunities, with the exception of choice, where people get to choose. In the data marketplace, people have to choose. However, the outcomes have to be different. And all things remaining equal, in this example, it would be absurd of you to choose the first car. Why? It's damaged. Think about the concept of single mothers who have reproduced for one man or more as damaged goods. From the perspective of a good man, a man in the top 5 to 10%, a man between age 18 and 35, but even more importantly for a man 36 and above, this is a horrible deal, except there is something fundamentally wrong with you as a man. I'm going to address this because I think, although I'm covering this session about single mothers, I like to speak to men who fall in this category. I'll leave you with what I said to the young man. After spending a few minutes explaining to him the importance of how to think about his decisions, I moved on to something that I thought was important. I said, let me put the woman aside. I don't know who she is. And so I've been thinking about your potential. I care more about your potential than how you feel about me. And my role is to get you to keep your eye on the prize, which is the future, and to ignore and avoid any obstacles that could stop you from getting to that future. But I said to him, I'm more perplexed with you as a boy, you as a man. I said, if someone came to me and said to me, there's a 20-year-old young man or 21-year-old young man who is looking to date, and of all the women he could find, he's chosen an 18-year-old who's had 2 children by 2 different men, neither of which committed to her within the context of a union, marriage, and none of which decided to remain with her. What would you say of that man, of the said man? I said, I would say, number one, he lacks self-identity. He has very low self-esteem. There is no self-concept. He's not self-assured. Perhaps he's a loser. He has no game frame. He has no resources. He doesn't know his value in the marketplace. And most importantly, perhaps he's going through a crisis of identity where he's trying to do what I call the savior syndrome. He has a savior syndrome, meaning he's come from a broken family and effectively he's trying to right the errors of the sins of his fathers. Maybe his father never stayed, and therefore he thinks that it is his responsibility to stay and raise another man's child. And I said, most importantly, I would also say that there are no men, older men around that young man, advising him on what to do. It is absurd for young men that young to be thinking about going into a permanent relationship with a girl that young who has made so many mistakes, but who has not recovered and learned from her mistakes. Now you might think, how can I pass such a judgment? Well, I just did. But in the conversation I had with the young man, I asked one question. I said, has she been to therapy? And he said no. But the young man could not understand why I asked the question. And I left him, and I seldom get upset about things when I have a conversation with people, especially people I don't really know. But I was heartbroken for a number of reasons. He was asking me questions that his father, the men around his family and community, should have told him. And what I have come to realize is that there are no good, strong, disciplined, structured, older men around younger men. Older men are trying to be cool and to be accepted by younger men, and so we just simply go with anything goes, rather than say, no, listen, son, you will regret this decision for financial reasons, for emotional reasons, and the data supports that position, which is, this will end badly for you. In the sessions to follow, I will go into elaborate details on why relationships are dream killers, relationships will steal your vision, relationships will damage your purpose and your calling. But most importantly, I'm going to focus on single mothers and men who go into relationship with women who have children from other men. Hopefully at the end of the series, I will move into other relationships. Relationships with your male friends can be dream killers. Relationships with family, what I call the third voice, can be dream killers. This is not exclusive to women or single mothers. The wrong relationships can sabotage your future. One right relationship can pave the way. Now understand, I'm not also saying that every boy or every young man who has come from a two-parent family will succeed. No. You could be a great father like David and have an appalling son like Absalom. You could also be a useless father like Saul, stubborn as they come, but have a great son like Jonathan. You see? It's not where you come from. It's the people around you, the environment. Environment is just as important as your genes and hereditary. Sometimes it's more important to be around good people than it is to come from a good family. Young men are making mistakes. I'm going to uncover and I'm going to blow a lid off the whole interaction, conversation when it comes to intersexual dynamics, but relationship between boys, single men, unmarried, with no children. That's my focus. With no children, and women who already have children from other men. You see, there's something from a nature's perspective. It's not natural. In the animal kingdom, it doesn't even happen. There are exceptions to the rule, but even a broken clock is right twice every day. I don't focus on the exceptions. I'll ask you to disagree with me vehemently. Leave comments, leave your position. I welcome any challenge. None will be removed, none will be censored, none will be deleted. If you are a woman, it's all game. Detractors and those who do not accept my position, you're more than welcome to air your disagreement. I will, at the end of this series, for those who really, really strongly want to disagree, I'm more than happy to have an interaction, live interaction with people who say, I disagree with you, and here are the reasons. We'll have not a debate, but a conversation. You don't have a debate amongst equals anyway. But let me stop for today, and I look forward to the sessions that follow. I'm going to try and break it down into smaller segments so I can expand and explain on the concept why. Or, to put it in a different way, so I can explain on the reasons behind the opinions that I'll be providing. But I will also say this. I'm not going to be giving you my opinions. My opinion doesn't really matter. I'm going to be giving you data. We've studied over 70 years of what we are seeing in the West. The destruction of the family unit, this disintegration of our Western Enlightenment and Judeo-Christian values. This has been studied for years and years and years. The data is conclusive. So what I'm sharing with you is supported by studies, results, data, primarily, and I should state my sources, primarily the Office of National Statistics in the UK. Most of the information I share comes from that website. The other sources of information, gov.uk, where necessary, I will provide the studies and the links to the interaction and the conversations, but I will also provide you with scholarly articles that have been written by great professionals, and not just professionals who have written pieces, but professionals who have been cited. Anybody can write a thesis, a PhD, an article, a documentation, but with regards to those that have been peer-reviewed, such as PhDs, or books by PhDs, the most important part is the citations you've received. The more citations you've received, the more credibility you might say, not just your theory, your research. I will be providing, alongside the conversations that I share, access and source of the data. Here we deal with facts, data, statistics, and studies. This is not just about opinions or perspectives. Opinions can be wrong. Opinions have been wrong. Data, fact, and truth, that's where we're heading towards. We're looking for the truth, but trying to follow a line that is true. Now, I hope today's session has been useful.